Welcome back everybody, Danny here for another sim racing video, and today we're going to have another sim racing workshop. So I know a lot of people, especially beginners in iRacing, really struggle to be competitive in the MX-5 Cup, which is basically the rookie class. It's where everybody starts from, and whether or not you do well in the MX-5 or the Mazda Cup, the Global Mazda Cup to be exact, whether or not you do well in that really has a huge factor on whether or not you continue on and keep on racing. And I know everybody wants to get up to that GT3 class or the Formula One class or something like that, but you have to make your way successfully through these rookie classes first before you can make it up to that stuff where the real fun actually is. Now, I've spent a great deal of time racing in the MX-5 Cup just because I like this style car. I moved my way on up well out of the rookie class a long time ago, but I still find myself coming back to the Mazda Cup to race. One, because it's fixed setups, and sometimes I just don't have a lot of time to invest in a setup in a car, so that puts everybody on a level playing field, and it simply is down to driving skill who wins the race. I like that. And then the other thing is I just really enjoy driving this kind of car. So I wanted to do this sim racing workshop to kind of give some tips and tricks, maybe kind of help you guys work out, for those of you who are struggling, work out maybe a better driving line or a racing line around the track. And the key to doing well in the Mazda Cup is you have to utilize the things that it has to offer, and you have to make sure you don't emphasize the problems with the MX-5. So there's kind of a two-step process here. So first I want to just talk about the elephant in the room. The MX-5 is a Mazda Miata here in the States. Even this racing version, even the Cup version, is very low on power. It's not a powerful car. It's not fast. Even in the longest straightaways on the tracks that you may be driving in, happen to drive this on in iRacing, I mean, tops, you may get up to 110, 115 on the longest straightaway. So we're not talking about a high horsepower car here. So it doesn't have that get up and go power to accelerate out of a corner and make up time. So you have to utilize what it has going for it to be consistent and to be competitive. So while this car is not high on power, it does have a 50-50 weight ratio front to back, and it's quite light altogether as a whole. So it makes it a very nimble car. And what you have to do is you have to transform that nimbleness, if that's a word, that lightness and that agility. Okay, it's a very agile car. I'll use that word. You have to transform that agility into momentum. So the key to doing well in the Mazda MX-5 is you have to stay with a consistent momentum. You have to have a continuation of momentum all the way around the track. The key to keeping up momentum is getting in and out of corners properly and with enough speed so that you can make the most of the following straightaway. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to hop on track, and I'm going to run, one very, very slow lap around Lime Rock Park, which actually at the time of this video, this happens to be the track that the Global MX-5 Cup is racing on right now. So that's why I picked this track. In the future, I may do some more of these on the other tracks that they run on, like Laguna Seca and etc. But for right now, it's on Lime Rock, so I wanted to do this workshop at Lime Rock. But what I'm going to do is do a really slow lap, stopping to point out certain things and to talk about what your mindset needs to be, what you need to be preparing for as you go around the track in these specific spots. So we'll go ahead and do that. I'm going to hop on the track. What you will notice when I come back here is I'm actually going to be just before the last corner of the track. So I'm not going to start this test drive from the first corner of the track or on the starting grid. I'm actually going to start showing you what you need to be doing just before the final corner on Lime Rock Park. The reason that is because each consecutive lap, your time is set up by the previous lap's finish. So that's very important. That's something to take in mind. But let's get to the track and I'll explain to you what I mean. Alright guys, so we are back on track here, and what you will notice is what I was saying before. We are actually on the just before the last right-hander of Lime Rock Park. And again, the reason why I want to emphasize that I'm starting here is because the entire next lap will be dependent on how I get through this corner and how much speed I can carry because of the way I come through this corner on the first straight. Because the difference between me running 102 miles an hour or 107 miles an hour makes a significant difference on your lap times. So what I'm going to do is, like I said, this is going to be very, very slow, guys, for this first lap or maybe the first 2 laps, because there's going to be spots that I'm going to be stopping. So we have just come around a right-hander. You will see later as we come back around the track that you'll be very wide, and you're going to want to utilize all of the track here. So when you come through that corner, you will be more than likely, you should be over here on this curb or this rumble strip area. I'm going to start moving pretty slowly here. As you come under this sign, you'll notice, I'm going to slow up here, you're going to be coming down this hill. Now, this can be a very touchy elevation change / corner, because when you get to the bottom of this hill, it can unsettle the car. So if you go into this corner unsettled, with the chassis of the car unsettled, it can royally destroy your entire next lap. And not to mention, it may even make you go wide in this corner, which a lot of people do, and go out into the grass. And if you go out into the grass on the left up here, you know that your lap time is ruined, and more than likely your race is ruined. So as I'm coming down this hill, what I do to keep the car in check is, as I get to the bottom of this hill, right now I'm going to use this shadow as a reference. As I get to the bottom of this hill, I take a pretty good stab at the brakes. Okay? Now, I want to emphasize a few things here. My intention of stabbing the brakes here is not to stop the car. My idea of this is not to slow down the car a lot. The reason why I'm stabbing the brakes here is to transition the weight of the car from the back to the front. So the combination of, as you're coming down this hill and stabbing the brakes quickly, which I'll show you in full speed later on, so you'll see exactly what I mean, but here I stab the brakes very quickly. What that does is that forces the weight on the front of the car. Okay, now I've stabbed the brakes, I'm still moving at a high pace, but I've got a lot of weight on the car, which means I can hold pretty much full throttle very close to this inner curb. I'm going to stop and talk about this. I'm holding full throttle after the stab of the brakes. I'm very close to this inner curb, not on it, just up to it. Again, you don't want to unsettle the car. The curbs will unsettle the MX-5 on its stock setup because it's very soft. So yeah, so you're going to be stabbing the brakes at the bottom of that hill, basically where that shadow is, then right back on to full throttle as fast as you can. You don't want to wait to get to full throttle until after you get in the straightaway, because you've already lost far too much time. If when you get to the bottom of that hill, if you stab the brakes, it'll settle the chassis, get right back into the throttle, and hug this interior line. You should be able to keep up a pretty significant amount of speed, and you're already on full throttle before you ever even get into the straightaway. What's going to happen is that will push you out wide, but if you've done it correctly, you will pretty much, for the most part, end up right on top of this curb over here. Use the curb, utilize it, you will not get an off track, and you use all of the track that you have available. Then you want to kind of cruise down this full throttle. Obviously, you're in a straightaway. You want to go as fast as you can here. If you've done this correctly, you should be in excess of 105, probably even more miles an hour, like 110, something like that. That's the speeds you should reach if you've done it correctly. If you do it incorrectly, you'll be lucky to hit 105 miles an hour. Now, that 5-mile-an-hour difference may not seem that drastic, but it makes a huge difference in your overall lap time how quickly you're getting down this straightaway. You have to remember this is the longest straightaway of the track, and you have to take huge advantage of straightaways because that's where you're gonna make up your time. Again, because the MX-5 Cup doesn't have a lot of power to force its way out of a corner, so you have to utilize these straightaways. Okay, the next thing I want you to take a look at is where you need to be prepared to stop. For me, the safe bet for the MX-5 on Lime Rock is getting on the brakes at the number 2 board, which you can see right over there to the left. Okay? You will be going pretty fast. Like I said, somewhere in between 105 to 110-ish, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, depending on how you hit that last corner. But if you're anything over 105 miles an hour, you can still stop by waiting until the 2 board to hit your brakes. Okay, I'm going to keep that in sight. So well, it just went out of screen there, but you know what I'm saying. Right here is where you want to get hard on the brakes. At the same time, because this entire time, obviously, you've been going straight down the straightaway. At the same time, you want to start hitting your brakes pretty hard, and you want to start turning to the right. Okay? I see far too many people waiting. Okay? Hopefully I'm explaining this. I'll show this better when I'm actually moving at a higher rate of speed. But I see far too many people waiting to start the right-hand turn to a little bit further out there, you know, taking it wide, basically. As soon as you start on the brakes, you want to start your steering into the right. And you're going to be kind of coming at an angle similar to this, aiming for that inside curb. The rate at which you need to be slowing down, this is what you need to be looking for. About the time you get to the concrete partition, these concrete sections that you're basically supposed to follow, you need to be at about 75 miles an hour. You can be maybe a mile or two more. You can definitely be a mile or two less, but the sweet spot, the speed is about 75 miles an hour right here. So from your 105, the bug flying around, sorry. From your 100, I'm sorry about that, it was a bug flying. So from your straightaway speed of 105, 110, from there, from your 2 board, your braking zone 2 board, to here, you need to have slowed down to about 75 miles an hour. Now, what you need to understand about this first turn here at Lime Rock Park is it is a decreasing radius, meaning you can take the first half of it faster than you can take the second half of it. This is very deceiving, especially when you're racing on a monitor and you don't have the depth perception. What happens is I see a lot of rookies or a lot of new people running off on the second half of this corner, and they go wide because they don't realize that this is not a continuous radius, it's a decreasing radius. So what you want to be visually looking for here, and again, I'll go around the track faster later. I'm going to take this very slow and very detailed, guys. When you see this split in these concrete areas here, this is when you need to start your transition to start slowing down. So you need to get out of the throttle a little bit more to start slowing you from your 75-ish miles an hour. You need to drop down to a minimum of about 67 or 68 miles an hour. Okay, any faster than 68 miles an hour, the Mazda Cup, this MX-5, will go off of the track wide. 68 is like the most you want to go through here. 68 miles an hour. Again, I'm not talking about kilometers an hour. This is miles per hour, guys. And what you want to be looking for is about the time you're seeing this inside curb is when you need to have met that 68 mile an hour limit. And there's a couple reasons for this. Number one, you obviously don't want to go off the track over here. But number two, this next straightaway is very important. It is short, very short, but it sets you up for a hugely important portion of the track that you can make a lot of time up, and it's also a possible passing zone. So you want to make sure that your car is under control. You want to make sure that the chassis is not unbalanced. So make sure that you've slowed down to this, at this point to about 68 miles an hour so that you come through here at a controlled rate of speed. You're going to hold these concrete little areas here. Just follow them through. Again, get as tight as you can to the curb on the inside, but don't ride the curb. The curbs upset the chassis in the Mazda MX-5. Remember, you're still running about 68 miles an hour or so. As you start to come out here, you can go wide, you can get back on the throttle all the way. What you want to do here, and here's where you have a decision to make, okay? Just about the time you pass the curb on the left that we just passed, there's two ways you can take this corner, okay? One is you can stay right on the inside and you can hold this tight line all the way around. And the other one is you can go out wide. Now, I go out wide, okay? I go over to the right, and I'll show you my path here in just a second. I'm going to explain to you why I do that. I lose a little bit of speed getting into the corner by going wide, but I can come out of this corner with much more speed than if I hold that inside corner. So what I do, and what I recommend you do, is come out here pretty wide. Again, you're, for the most part, on full throttle here. You're going to come out wide, and then you're going to give a light brake input. Again, these are just quick stabs. The intention is not to slow the car down per se. The intention of these stabs here is to put the weight of the car on the front of the chassis, on the front wheels, because when the weight is on the front wheels of this Mazda MX-5, it turns a lot better and it stays much more stable. So you're going to give a stab of the brakes, and then you're going to start your turn in. You start wide, and then you come in tight, right? Whereas this is what I was saying. A lot of people I see hold this entire corner really tight, but by the time you get to the end of it, you've lost so much speed, it's not worth that tight line. So I recommend coming wide like I did, and then gradually make your way into the concrete surface. Ride this curb on the left-hand side. Don't hit it, just ride it again. Okay? If you've taken that outside line and your car is in control, it's going to be much easier at this point to hit this second concrete divider, or whatever you want to call this, the concrete surface. If you take that inside line, sometimes you get pushed wide and you can't really line yourself back up with this concrete. But if you take that wide line, it's easier to line yourself up with this concrete. Now, this is really important because this next section of the track, they are curves. Okay, it's a gradual curve to the right and then a gradual curve to the left. What I want you to keep in mind here is you want to think of this section of the track as a straightaway, because you gain more speed and you take up less time on your lap if you're going straight than turning. So what I mean here by this, guys, is you're going to come in here. Again, you're going to hug this curb on the inside, but don't ride on it. Hug it. At this point, when you come out of here, this next section of the track, you're going to come over here to this curb. If you've got a little bit of excess speed, you may have to bleed some of that speed off by getting over on this curb on the left. But what I want you to look at is look out in the distance here. This is obviously two transitional curves. You've got a right-hander and then you've got a left-hander. But I want you to think of this. You need to think of this section as a straightaway. Okay, there's no really any need to steer or do anything like that. You're gonna go as straight as possible here. So what I typically do is I come off of the curb on the left here. Okay, you can actually, this is not a curb, you can ride this a little bit. Okay, and here's where you just don't worry about the corners so much. Just go straight through here. Okay, until you get to about right here, then you want to turn briefly because you're going to want to stay on the wide side here. At about this point, let me back up. I'll back up a little bit and I'll give you a reference here. Let me see if there's something on the ground. Let's see here. Okay, yeah, perfect. There's dirt on the grass over there where people go off. Just about the time that you get to where the dirt stops. So that's going to be right over the left-hand side of the nose of the car, just over the hood there, okay? About at this point, you're going to stab the brakes, like I've talked about several times. The intention is not to slow down the car. The intention here is to stab the brakes to get the weight on the front of the car and start that rotation, start the car being able to turn and have a rotation under control instead of being out of control and loose. So when you stab these brakes, what that's going to do is put the weight of the car on the front wheels. Obviously, we'll be going much faster. That will allow you to turn in here. You can ride, I actually do, you got to be careful not to get off track, but I do ride this curb a little bit. Speed-wise, as you come over the crest of this hill, you should be as close as possible to 90 miles an hour. Believe it or not, that is doable. I'll show you guys in just a second. It may take a few laps for me to show you. But if you line all that up perfectly, like I was saying before, you should be able to crest this hill at about 90 miles an hour. You do need to be careful and be cautious, because if you go over that crest at that speed, the car does get very light on this side of it. It doesn't leave the ground, but the chassis gets very light, and you need to make sure you've got a good grip on the wheel, because sometimes it does try to get swirly. After you've made it over there, you're going to stay wide here. This right here is pretty much a full, it's not a full throttle corner, but you only have to get out of the throttle ever so slightly. Okay, you just need to probably about right here, give up on the throttle a little bit, just release the throttle pedal ever so quickly, put your foot right back on it, and you should be able to hug this curb, probably right here where I'm running through. Hug this curb, stay on the concrete, and by the time you get right here, you should be back on full throttle. Okay, the key is setting yourself up to where you are back on full throttle before you exit the corner. You don't want to have to be getting on full throttle after you're already in the straightaway. You want to be able to shoot yourself out of these corners, and to shoot yourself out of these corners, you need to set yourself up to be back on throttle before the exit of the corner. So what that means is you may have to slow down before the corner a little bit. Hope that makes sense. So as you come out of this corner, you'll see we are back where we were. You're going to come out of this corner very wide. You will ride these rumble strips. Everybody typically does if you're going this fast. And you're going to come over the crest of this hill. And this is where I was talking about earlier. We're back around to pretty much the beginning of the track, where the car can get very unstable if you're not careful. So down at the bottom of this hill, you want to stab the brakes and then hug the inner curb, and then bam, you're back in the straightaway. So this time, I'm going to kind of explain it at a little bit faster pace, and we'll get faster each time. I'll kind of explain to you what's going on here. Obviously, I'm not going to go as fast as I can just yet. All right, what you want to be looking out for here is the 2 brake marker. On the brakes, go ahead and turn in. You're going to be downshifting, getting to about 75 miles an hour right here, and then transitioning to about 65 right here, 68 miles an hour right here. You're going to come wide. If you have to roll on that rumble strip, you can. Then come out here wide. Start wide, turn in tight. Make your way over to the concrete. Ride the inside curb. Come right here, ride this inside curb. Full throttle now. You can come out here on this curb if you need to, but you need to be on full throttle. Treat this portion of the track like a straightaway. Okay? Here where the dirt ends, stab the brake, back on full throttle, turn in, crest the hill. Same thing here. You can pretty much just give a light release of the gas, get back on it, come out here on the curb, full throttle, stab the brake, back on full throttle. I'm full throttle right here. So I'm going to try to run, may not be my fastest lap, but I'm going to try to run a couple of laps and pay attention to what I'm doing here. I'll try to talk you through it if I can keep up. Alright guys, so what I went ahead and did is I went ahead and did a few laps, and now we're actually on the replay. That way I can talk you through it while we're watching me driving, rather than me trying to talk you through a quick lap, because sometimes I get a little messed up when I try to talk and do my quick laps at the same time. So what I want you to pay attention to here is, you can see right here, you can see my throttle inputs, my braking inputs, and obviously I'm not running a clutch just for the sake of this tutorial. I typically do run a clutch, guys, but just for this tutorial, I didn't have it turned on, just for the sake of making it easier for me to talk to you guys. But right here, you can see my steering inputs and my throttle and my braking inputs. And really what I also want you to pay attention to is the speeds at which I'm traveling through these particular places on the track, because that'll let you know. If you compare, do your own laps and say, man, I'm only going 80 miles an hour through there, he's going 90. What is he doing differently than me that allows him to go that much faster? Now, I'm not, like I said, I'm not the fastest person, but this previous lap that you're seeing right here was kind of a warm-up lap. But, each time I pretty much consecutively get faster and faster, and, I get down in the 59 threes and things like that. So let's let's go ahead and we'll start playing this here. All right, so I'm going to put it in slow-mo, and what you'll notice is I hit the brake right at the 2 marker. I'm starting to turn in hard right. I'm at that corner there. Notice my speed is 76, 75 miles an hour. I'm starting to slow down that transition here because that curve gets tighter. I'm at the 67, 68 mark now. I go a little bit wide here, but that's okay. Typically, I wouldn't go that wide, but I did just for this particular lap. That's okay. You see how I come back wide here. Now I'm going to start that transition to get back tight. I didn't hold the tight line the whole time. I went wide and went back in tight. This allows me to get back on the throttle. I'm full throttle now. Can ride that curb right there. I release just for a second and right back on full throttle and ride that curb out there. This is the portion of the track you're full throttle the entire time, and you're going to treat it like a straightaway. Okay? So, all right, and notice light stab of the brakes, and look when I full throttle. Now I want you to look at that. Let's back up just a hair. I want you to notice when I get on full throttle. I am back on full throttle in this corner before I'm anywhere near the exit. Okay, look, full throttle. So that's really important. I am full throttle before I even get to the inside curb. That's really important because what that does is that allows you to maintain that around 90 mile an hour speed that I was talking about. If you can maintain that 90 mile an hour speed on the other side of the hill, you've got a lot more momentum. And the key to being quick in the MX-5 is the momentum. 89, 90 miles an hour over that crest. Now here I do stab, yeah, I gave a quick stab of the brakes. You don't have to, but I did just to start the rotation of the car around. You'll see I go wide out on the rumble strip there. I call that a rumble strip. And I'm full throttle down this hill. You'll see I give it a light stab down here in this shadow. I just stab it real quick. Back on full throttle. Full throttle. You know, it's really important where you get on that full throttle. Here we go. I'll run one live for you. Kind of talk you through it as we go. Right now I'm really paying attention to that 2 marker. I'm on the brakes hard on that 2 marker. I've already started steering into the right on the concrete. Now I'm slowing myself down to that 67 mile an hour mark. On the throttle hard again. I'm going out wide, a little stab of the brakes, come back in tight, get on the concrete, hug that curb, go hard as I can right here. I'll let off just a second, back on full throttle, ride the curb. Treat this section as a straightaway, going as hard as I can, 95, 96 miles an hour, light stab of the brakes, back full throttle. 91, I went, yeah, so I crested right at about 90, 91 miles an hour. Little tough to the brakes, start that rotation, hard on the throttle. You can use the curb, you will not get off track over there. So yeah, so you can kind of just see how, you know, you can kind of just see how I position the car and where I use the brakes and stuff. Let me do for the next few laps, what I'll do is I'll put us back into cockpit camera. And yeah, we'll just go through it again. Hard on the brakes at the 2 marker, slowing us down. Yep, slowing us down to that 66, 67 miles an hour, 68 or so. Back on the throttle hard. Little stab of the brakes, go out wide, turn in sharp. It's the same story every time. The key is consistency. You know, it's hitting your brake zones, getting back on the throttle when you're supposed to. I did get a little bit loose here on this lap, but even still, I worked through it, and I continued right on with my game plan. So I'm still carrying about 90 miles an hour over that hill. So even though I got squirrely, I was able to get it back because I'm maintaining that same game plan throughout the entire race. I do go wide here, but I didn't get it off track, so that's okay if that happens. Stab the brake, back on the throttle. Full throttle. Now, if you don't, in that specific spot, if you don't do that stab of the brake and then you try to do the full throttle, you will go wide and you will go off. It's important to stab that throttle. So yeah, this is where I finished up. So anyways, guys, you know, you can replay this or whatever as many times as you want to kind of follow my, my lines and my braking points and things like that. But again, what I want to emphasize here is to do well in the Mazda Cup. Everybody is on the same playing field. The car, you can't customize the car. It is what it is. So you have to make the best or make the most of what it has available for you, and you have to try to avoid the problem spots. So it's not a powerful car, so you have to avoid having to use the engine to thrust yourself forward. To do that, you have to use momentum. And luckily for us, the MX-5 is a very agile car, like I was saying in the beginning. So you have to use that agility to position the car in the correct places on the track so that you can be on the throttle earlier on the way out of a corner, so that you can get going at a higher rate of speed in the straightaway, take opportunities for passing and stuff like that. But yeah, that's the key that you need to remember. No matter what track you're on, the key is going into the corner a little slower so that you can be back on the throttle a little harder. If you take a little more time to get through the corners, that's okay if you are setting yourself up to be able to make more time up in the straightaways, because the straightaways are more important. That's where you can utilize that top speed. You can get passing zones, like I said, and things like that. So yeah, so I hope that helped you guys. I mean, like I said, I'm not a professional. I'm not the fastest guy, but I do run pretty consistent. Most of the time I finish in the top 5 in a race, especially in the Mazda Cup. I've won a lot of races first place. And it's just from repetitiveness of racing this car over and over again, and learning the little nuances that it has and what you don't need to do and what you do need to do. So like I said, guys, I just wanted to do this workshop. Hopefully this may help a couple people that are new, that are struggling. Just remember, in the MX-5, it's all about momentum. You have to remember, it's momentum. It's to keep the average speed up as high as you can throughout the entire track. Now that doesn't mean go as fast as you can the whole time and wreck, but you have to be smart about it. But do the best you can to keep that momentum up. Try to avoid slowing down too much. That way you have to work the engine to get the car back going and things like that. But like I said, I really will end this here, guys. Hopefully this helped at least 1 or 2 people out at some point. Thanks so much for sticking in this long if you did, and I will see you guys in the next video.